Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Show, where we're sort of continuing the conversation that we had from last week about mothers, because it is Mother Wound season, according to me, and my Mother Wound course is starting soon. If you're interested in that, go to terricole.com/Mother Wound. In the meantime, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the impact to ourselves and our lives when we have mean or rejecting mothers. Like specifically, what happens for us if we have that experience. I'm going to be walking you through all of the things. So why this was coming back into my mind is that I had a lot of people on YouTube asking me questions, and a lot of people from the podcast asking me questions about mother wounds. Now, if we look at the zeitgeist, if we look at from a point of view of like people in the public eye, Jennette McCurdy wrote a book called I'm Glad My Mother's Dead, basically, about having an abusive relationship with her mother being enmeshed with her and super controlling. The actress Ariel Winter was legally emancipated from her mother for, again, control, and I think it was inappropriate use of her money. Drew Barrymore has also talked about growing up in environments that were emotionally unsafe. I mean, literally we know she was going to Studio 54 when she was 7 years old, so that can't possibly be good for you. So while every story is different, every daughter of a mean or neglectful or preoccupied mother, what the examples have in common, maybe not the Drew Barrymore one as much, but is that it's really not the mean mom thing. It's the unmet need, so that if that's the case, the Drew Barrymore goes back in, lack of boundaries, and sometimes the role confusion that we talked about last week, right, being the parentified child. So there's tons of examples out there, and then you guys write to me and say that you have questions about it as well. So here we are. This is the reason I created a Mother Wound course, where you can identify and integrate these mother wound experiences into your life. But let's move into, while everyone's story is different, there's a lot of things that are the same if you had a mean mother. And one of the number one things that I've heard from my therapy clients over the last 30 years who had mean mothers is the isolation of it all. Like, it can be so isolating if you have a mean or rejecting mother, because nobody wants to talk about it, right? Nobody wants to believe that that's true, especially if they didn't have it. They can't even imagine that you had it. And a lot of times people can be really judgmental about your experience. And people also, again, I said this last week, where people are like, you only have one mother, you should love her unconditionally. And I think that these comments are really just from people who don't have mean mothers. And it's so painful when you're in that experience. Besides feeling like the odd man out, right? You feel isolated because you had a different experience. But what ends up happening is that we learn not to talk about it. And that just makes the isolation and the shame that goes along with this experience go even deeper. All right, what else can happen? Well, we can grow up with this deep desire to please other people, right? So if you were looking for approval all the time with your mother, it's like, and she didn't give it to you, you end up, looking for approval in all the wrong places, right? We have the disease to please with other people in our lives. So what does that look like? I mean, it affects everything. It affects how we set boundaries. It affects us saying yes when we want to say no so much of the time. It really makes it difficult to be honest, right? Think about the disease to please, what that really means. It's just the people-pleasing syndrome in our relationships, which means that there is a shit ton of self-abandonment that goes along when you have the disease to please. So it's something that I've talked about, obviously, for many, many years, but it's something that I want you to be aware of in your life if this is happening, right? Do you avoid confrontation at all costs? Do you apologize often, especially when you're not even sorry? A lot of times when you have the disease to please, you might apologize even though you're mad. You might avoid that conversation even though you have something to say, but there's a fear of the other person disapproving of what it is that you have to say. So the disease to please is real. It's absolutely exhausting. And in the guide that'll go along with this episode, I'll give you a list of things that you can look at for the disease to please. There's 4 questions that you'll answer. The third thing that can happen if we have mean mothers is we end up with a lack of confidence, right? If the primary person in your life was rejecting and mean or unloving in some way, this really can impact your self-esteem, because we're like, wow, this is the person who's supposed to think the most of me, and it seems like they think the least of me. So feeling like your own mother doesn't like you can really create feelings of inferiority and unlovability. And what happens is we end up repeating this, right? So that's the next thing, right? Is that people who've experienced unloving and mean mothers often find themselves in situations later in life where they're attracting similarly mean or judgmental women into their lives. Could be romantic relationships too, like we could switch that up. But a lot of times, what I've seen in my therapy practice is that the daughter of a mean and rejecting mother will have friends who are very punitive, who are also mean and rejecting. And it's like repeating this pattern of constantly seeking approval or affection in some way. And there's something about this where we really are, like, I always visualize this as like it is the child within you seeking a do-over, wanting something different. But there won't be something different if we don't have new skills, right? So we have to become aware of the pattern in order to change the outcome. But I almost feel like a kid attracting mean and rejecting women can happen because really we want a different outcome. We are hoping that, but we also are attracted to those mean and rejecting women because somewhere down deep, they remind us of our mean and rejecting mother. And again, when I say mean and rejecting, this doesn't mean this person was mean and rejecting all the time, but you know it. If you had a mean and rejecting mother, if you had a mean mother, you absolutely know it, because there's no way it hasn't left an imprint on you. And for the friendship stuff, you can use the 3 cues for clarity, which I will put in the guide, terricole.com/guide, that you can use to identify in what ways, right? Who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? And how or why is this relational dynamic, the way that I'm interacting with them? And a lot of times with mean friends, we are seeking that same approval, that same affection that was withheld from us in childhood. So awareness is the key to breaking the pattern and really start the healing process. But for a lot of women, very smart and accomplished women, they're shocked to see that they've attracted this into their lives. And it's interesting how, I remember one of my clients, we were identifying together how she always had friendships that she was walking on eggshells in the friendship. And I remember something that Jennifer Gardner, the actress, had said long ago about friendships, were like the only lasting friendships in her life are ones that never guilt her, and she doesn't guilt them. Ones that if you don't hear from them for a year and then they come back, you're like, okay, like no walking on eggshells, no dysfunctional bullshit, like straightforward, straight love, you're always welcome, that's it. And I think that when you get to a certain point in your life with your own mental health, you can say that. So much of the time, what we are playing out in our romantic and our platonic and our work relationships, you know, what do we always say? You know, we repeat what we do not repair, as Christine Obao Langley would say. So this repeating stuff is real, and it actually matters. What else is impacted, of course, by having a mean mother is our relationships. You know, this is all attachment theory stuff, right? Who is the earliest, right? We have the earliest caregivers or the primary caregivers in our life, and how they impact how we relate then, right? So we all know, because there's a lot out there now about avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, secure attachment. You know, we hear all of this. But ambivalent attachment happens because you've learned from this experience, right? So that intimacy and connectedness are not safe. So again, that could also be avoidant anxious. It's the same description. So we're never fully into it, right? And it can also come out as just straight up avoidant, meaning that because you find relationships so stressful, you just simply take yourself out of the running, or you are in relationships, but you keep a ton of distance between you and the other person. A lot of times I would have therapy clients who would end up sort of preemptively either sabotaging or actually straight up ending a relationship because their fear of the risk of being rejected was so great that they couldn't even stand to be in the relationship. And this is all early attachment stuff. And if you have a mean and rejecting mother, this can impact you in that way as well. So when we think about what do we need to do, right, to change this experience and to counterbalance the impact of having this type of a mother, I think it's really about self-consideration and self-care. And this stuff might sound trite, like you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. But we really do need to treat ourselves the way that we deserve to be treated. And what I find, a lot of women with mother wounds are looking out instead of looking in. They are looking for someone else to fill this space that only self-love, that only self-consideration can fill. And what ends up happening is that if we haven't done the healing work, then we go back to that repeating relationship realities where we were talking about we repeat what we do not repair. And what happens? We attract people who not only mirror our childhood wounds, as Harville and Helen Hendricks talk about in their imago therapy theory, but we actually are attracting people who re-injure us in that same way. So part of the process of having a mother wound is understanding that part of our job is to become the good and kind and caring, consistent mother or mother figure that we may have not have gotten in this life. And you really can do it for yourself, but you have to go in before you go out. So part of this process, the way that I have the Mother Wound course set up, and the way that I teach it and the way that I talk about it here, is that we have these pillars of growth, of transformation, these pillars of integration. And the first pillar is awareness, right? Because we cannot change anything that we're unaware of or anything that we're in denial of. And then we move in, so it's self-awareness, and then it's self-knowledge, which is really hard when you have a mother wound. And I walk you through it in the course. If you're interested in the course, go to terricole.com/motherwound, where we have to go back into the basement of our minds. We have to go back in time. We have to honestly look at what we experienced. And that can be very painful. So we do it in the course, we do it very slowly. But most people don't do it if you're not being gently invited to do it, which is the way I would invite you to do it, very gently, small steps at a time. We don't think to do it on our own because it's painful. But self-knowledge is such an important pillar because it's like, okay, this is what happened, right? And then we have self-acceptance. It is not just self-acceptance, meaning us accepting ourselves as we are. It is that. But it's really accepting that what we experienced was real and that it matters. And what I find that a lot of women who come into my Mother Wound course or send me notes online are so good at minimizing their own experience. They're so good at acting like maybe I'm just being a big baby about this. Or they say, why, it happened 40 years ago. Why should it matter now? And so part of the process of self-acceptance is being able to say, what happened to me was real. It was super painful. I didn't do a mother effing thing to deserve it because you didn't, you guys. I don't care how you acted as a child. It doesn't matter. You deserved consistent, regulated attention and love. That is what you deserved then, and that's what you deserve now. The fourth pillar is self-compassion. And I find that when we have a mother wound, especially mean mother style wound, because there's all kinds of different mother wounds. Somebody who had a drug addict or an alcoholic as a mother who wasn't necessarily mean to them but wasn't there, that still, of course, gives you a mother wound. But it's not the same flavor or style as having a mean mother wound. It is very particular. It is super painful. So that compassion that was missing from your mother or your mother figure, that is, I think that for women with mother wounds, this is one of the most difficult things to do, but it's also one of the most revolutionary when you do it, which is sincerely approaching your healing with compassion, compassionate curiosity, instead of all of this judgment and all of this fear, which I understand too, which is why you need someone to guide you through the process. Whether it's a therapist or whether you join my mother wound course or there's other people who have mother wound books out there, having a guide. Because when we have a mother wound, it activates the child within us so much of the time. So much is activating, so much is triggering in life that you need a safe container to be able to walk through these healing steps. So self-compassion was the fourth pillar out of the 5 pillars. And the 5th pillar is self-love, which to me is like all the self-consideration and the self-celebration in one pillar. Because I think that self-love can be, I don't know, there's something about self-love that is very non-specific. And I don't think it's helpful when people tell us if we just loved ourselves more, everything would be okay, right? We don't even know what that means. At least I don't. But I do know what self-consideration means. And that means thinking about you and choosing not to self-abandon. And those are skills that you can learn. So in the Mother Wound course, I walk you through all of this. And we're in this safe and sacred container with women from all over the world. And it's like-hearted, like-minded, supportive, loving women. It is the most healing container you will most likely ever be in your life. If you've ever taken a course with me, you know that that is true. I know I'm not perfect, but I also know what I'm really, really good at. And creating and holding a safe and sacred container is something that I am really, really good at. So I would be honored if it's something you're interested in doing. Go to terricole.com/motherwound. I also put all this information for you in the guide, terricole.com/guide, as I do every single week, trying to make your life easier, trying to amplify my positive ripple in the world. So if this episode on Mean Mothers was helpful to you, please share it with people in your life. And if you decide to sign up for the Mother Wound course, terricole.com/motherwound, please share that with people in your life if you know someone else who has a mother wound and could use to heal, because the more the merrier is what I say. So I hope that this added value to your life, soothed your soul in some kind of way. And as always, take care of you.